in the Longfellow Oration Contest, we are again watching for expressive and word-perfect execution.
The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year.
Wait. I remember. I was there, and it was Paul Revere and William Dawes who made the ride.
I beg your pardon, sir. Who are you?
I'm William Dawes, and it didn't begin the midnight either.
I didn't know that.
Neither did Mr. Longfellow, or at least he chose to ignore it. No, I'll tell you what really happened. Now, Paul was there all right. He and a group of patriots had been watching the Redcoats for quite a few days. Then, in the evening of April 18th at about 10 o'clock p.m., word arrived that the Redcoats were preparing boats for crossing the Charles River.
Oh, I thought you didn't know if they were coming by land or by sea. And you say they came by the river?
Indeed, and when they saw the Redcoats preparing their landing crafts, they knew something was afoot. Being suspicious, 2 days earlier, Paul had made a trip to Concord and warned the people there. The townspeople began hiding arms and valuables and barns wealth in the neighboring swamps. That's when he called me to come in. I was just lad of the town.
The regulars are coming out! The regulars are coming out!
Who in the world are you?
He's Paul Revere!
Oh, wonderful. I'd like to shake your hand, sir. It's the famous Paul Revere. Look at the Wait, didn't you actually call the British are coming? The British are coming?
No, we called the regulars are coming out!
Why do you call them the regulars? Aren't they the British?
Well, we were all the British subjects. It would seem funny to call them the British when we were also the British. No, we called them the regulars, or the redcoats, or the lobsterbacks. They traded that name.
Lobsterbacks?
Because of their red coats, they look like lobsters.
Oh. Well, to be sure, I hadn't thought about that. Well, tell me, what really happened next?
I needed to go to Lexington to warn Mr. Samuel Adams and the Honorable John Hancock that there were a number of soldiers marching.
We needed to warn them.
We couldn't be sure. So it was supposed they would go to Lexington by way of the Cambridge River, but it was also possible that they would go to Concord to take the colony ammunition stores.
It was scary not knowing which way they would go. How were we going to warn people? Paul couldn't ride both roads at once.
Well, you're right. It could get a bit tricky going 2 ways at once.
I returned from Concord through Charleston. There, I met up with some gentlemen, and we agreed on a plan that if the British came out by water, we would hang 2 lanterns in the North Church steeple, and if they came out by land, 1 as a signal. We were apprehensive, as either way would be difficult to travel.
So you were only guessing which way they would go?
The probability that they would take the Cambridge River was the most likely. So if that was the signal, then I would ride along that route and warn the residents. We still couldn't be absolutely sure.
I had to go the longer, darker, less known about route.
Hey, we just couldn't rule it out. So I asked Joe Dawes if he would take that route and warn the residents. As I recall, he readily agreed.
Yes, I recall if I would have known that it would erase me from history forever, I wouldn't have! But I did want to warn Mr. Adams and Hancock and my neighbors, so I left earlier in the evening than the Revere, taking the longer, harder, darker, less known about land route to Lexington, where we agreed to meet up.
It's only right. You couldn't have done anything else. And not a word of it in Mr. Longfellow's poem?
Not a word.
He got the rest of it right, though. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land, and 2 if by sea. And I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with muffled oar.
Sorry, the muffled oar was a lady's petticoat wrapped around the oar.
Oh.
What's that? I won't be asking how you got the petticoat. Then he said good night, and with muffled oar, silently rowed to the Charlestown shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset, British man of war, a phantom ship with each mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide.
Wonderful. Even the guy who owned the lanterns gets more publicity than I do.
Meanwhile, alley and street, wanders and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms, and the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore.
You see what I mean? Nothing about my trials. Try this new verse. Meanwhile, his friend, who was just a lad, rode miles along the road silent and dark, where every shadow appeared a stark, redcoat wanting to do something bad.
It just doesn't sound quite right, sir.
What was Paul Revere doing while I was being chased by shadows? Sitting around waiting for a lantern.
2 lanterns, actually. I know this part. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. And look, as he looks, on the belfry's height a glimmer and then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. Now that's poetry.
I have to admit, Dawes is right. I left by 11, and it wasn't dark that night. The moon shone bright. There were shadows in my path, too, and mine were real. I saw 2 British soldiers standing under a tree. One started his horse and rode towards me. The other went up the hill to head me should I escape the first. I turned my horse round about and rode towards the mystic. The first followed me, and finding that he could not catch me, returned. I rode my horse to the mystic and warned Adams and Hancock.
I know this part. A hurry of hooves in the village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bolt in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles and passing a spark, struck out by a steed flying fearless and fleet. That was all. And yet, through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night, and the spark, struck out by that steed in its flight, kindled the land into flame with its heat. He has left the village, and mounted the steep, and beneath him tranquil and broad and deep is the mystic, meeting the ocean tides, and under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides.
We were supposed to go to Lexington to warn Mr. Adams and Colonel Hancock together.
You got in a half an hour later than I did. Lives were at stake. We were in a hurry.
I had 5 more miles to ride than you did.
It didn't matter. They wouldn't budge. They just didn't seem to appreciate how close the danger was. At least we went to Concords together.
It was midnight by then.
It was 12 by the village clock, and we crossed the bridge into Medford town. We heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. Oh, wait a minute. You said it was midnight when you left Lexington. Oh, what time did you get into Concord?
Wrong. What does Longfellow say about Concord?
Well, it was 2 by the village clock when he came to the ridge in Concord town. Nope.
No.
Well, how would you know? And who are you exactly? Who is he?
He's Sam.
Dr. Samuel Prescott.
Doctor.
He joined us in Lexington.
Oh, you rode too, did you? So the 3 of you were the heroes that warned Concord.
What?
So you didn't make it all the way to Concord with these 2 gentlemen?
I made it. I'm the only one who made it.
Amazing. I didn't know that. And what happened to you 2?
Hush.
Died.
Well, as I said, there were redcoats all over the place.
It was a miracle that we weren't all hung as traitors when we were captured.
Well, you were all captured?
Momentarily, some of us got away.
They were pretty convincing, putting a pistol in my face and saying, "Stop. If you move an inch further, you're a dead man." I stopped.
Then they threatened to blow our brains out, but I got away, so...
And you, sir?
I was captured, but I used it to our advantage. They told me they were just out looking for deserters, but I told them that I knew better. I knew what they were after. I told them I had word to the people and that I would have 500 men there soon.
May I continue, sir? books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again, under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. Is that part true?
Oh, yes.
So, Mr. Revere warned Misters Adams and Hancock and saved the papers. The good doctor fortunately was out riding and... By the way, doctor, what were you doing out at midnight?
I was returning home from courting a young lady in Lexington.
Nothing to be ashamed of. So, you rode on to Concord and warned the people. This is better than the poem. Mr. Doss, sir, after you escaped the regulars, what did you do?
My horse bucked me off, and I had to walk.
I am so impressed. And Mr. Longfellow would have served you better if he'd included all of you in his poem. This will be better than word-perfect execution. So through the night rode Samuel Prescott, William Dawes, and Paul Revere. And so through the night went their cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a voice of defiance and not of fear. No, that's not quite right. This deserves more patriotism. Let's try this again. So through the night rode Samuel Prescott, William Dawes, and Paul Revere. And so through the night went their cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a voice of defiance and not of fear. 80. Let's try this one more time. So through the night went Samuel Prescott, William Dawes, and Paul Revere. And so through the night went their call of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a voice of defiance and not of fear.
You want to skip to the end?